guess it's the first time you've seen that film in 23 years. I mean, your initial reactions to going back in time.
Hold on, can we just say that Adrian hasn't aged? He looks the same age. This is mad.
Makeup.
This is crazy.
Not a day.
That's one. I'd forgotten all the stuff that was in it. I'd forgotten so many of the scenes. I'd forgotten what we did. And as I was watching the scenes, I remembered the bit before action and the bit after cut. That's what was coming back to me all the time. And I was just laughing. I remember some of the scenes we had to do. Yeah, so it brought back loads of memories. I'd forgotten a lot of it.
Yeah, amazing. It was the same. Like I talk about this movie all the time because it was like the start of my career. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? So, and just watching it, I remembered, like you start to, the scenes come back to you, but I just remembered the stuff we used to do. Mm-hmm. Like we were all great friends, like off camera. So we spent so much time together. And then, you see people in the background that didn't actually have lines and that.
They were there.
That was my friend for like 4 years. And then we went on holiday and and it's just crazy. But it was like the experience was just real. And it was my first experience of just making a film, making a production, being a part of it from the beginning. So yeah,
it was a street casting as well. If I remember. So they had maybe about 100 kids in, and then they slowly whittled it down until they got to the bones of what's in the movie. So,
okay.
Yeah, I have to say I think the same as Ashley, and it was more of an experience than just regular filming, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. It was that we all felt really close. That's probably down to you, Lennie. But yeah, I think it was really lovely to see it. I'm really surprised that it hasn't been on at all in the interim. That's really shocking, isn't it?
Yeah, it's aged beautifully. Yeah. It really holds up.
Yeah, like Adrian.
I guess that's like slightly the sad thing about it is that what we're talking about in the film we're still dealing with today. Mm-hmm. That's why it still resonates and it's still so relevant, unfortunately. But it is a powerful movie, and yeah, so good to be a part of it.
Simon, I mean, as a director of Storm Damage, how this all come together in 2000, given that the BBC weren't doing things like this at the time?
Well, Lennie wrote this, and it's a lot of it's based on his life, and so he wrote it very much from the heart. And the BBC weren't maybe as opportunistic as they might be now, and I think he had a bit of a grind getting it made, but we did get it made, and it was a bit of a shock for me seeing the film because I sort of went, oh wow, I'm still kind of proud of that, even though I was a sort of naive kid really when I did it, and it's led me to a very great lasting friendship with Lennie, and I was slightly proud of all these people here.
He had a long journey getting it on, I believe, and I could be corrected by somebody in the audience, but I believe it was with another company. Was it that right? It was with a different channel, and then it moved and it shifted. And okay. Well, it was a long time getting it done, and it was autobiographical. I was essentially playing Lennie in the piece, and he then played Boniface. And Boniface was a real character, name changes. And what happened in the film happened to Lennie. And that was his world when he left university, went back and worked in the house where he was brought up. So I sort of watched Lennie a little bit to see how to play certain moments. And it was wonderful having him on set as well to just bounce off. His writing is amazing as well. There's no fat on it. There's no fat. And characters will jump from one thought to another. They'll speak what they're supposed to say and then speak what's happening underneath and then jump straight back to the top line. And that's how he writes. And it was great to play, really good to play.
Ashley, I was speaking to Ruth Caleb recently, who produced, of course, Bullet Boy, which you starred in, who told me that she cast you for that role based on a performance in Storm Damage. How important was playing the role of Stefan in, I guess, launching your career?
So important. I mean, it's really weird because I know how important it was and has been now, but when I was doing it, I didn't get it. You know, it was like my first experience, making a film, and I just didn't understand the process. Simon will probably remember me being late a few times and just being like I just didn't understand.
You were late once, by the way.
I just didn't understand the importance of it and, just being a part of that team. But once I went through that experience, it changed my life, and like I said, I'll say it again. I talk about this film like at least a few times a week because someone's always asking like, what about that? What about Storm Damage? And it was the start of a genre. It was one of the first of its kind for my generation anyway. So it's kind of stuck in people's minds and it's embedded in our culture.
And it probably took another 10 years before something
Else
of a similar
yeah.
ilk came along. So,
Bullet Boy, by the way.
Which you're in as well. Please watch that as well. Kate, I can see you there. Can you see me? Hi. The character of Kay, I think, is so important because she seems to be a kind of bridge between Stefan and Danny initially. I mean, what attracted you to the role of Kay?
Oh gosh, I think I loved the script when I read it, and she's a really relatable person. She really cares for the kids, and yeah, I don't know what else to say.
Alexis, what I find amazing about your character is, on the one hand, we see the opening scene where you're reciting poetry quite beautifully, and then the final scene where you're, of course, killing Stefan here. I mean, how important do you think realism is in that character as someone who is from an urban, multicultural background, but of course has nuances and shades of grey to the character as well?
I think that's true of a lot of urban kids, There are a lot of kids who, are educated, they just fall into bad habits, And I think with his character, he was, they had their little gripe and it could have gone either way, but it obviously went a very tragic way, but it could have quite easily gone the other path,
This man here. I mean, you were already an established actor prior to Storm Damage, and the role of Danny was something that struck me immediately as a 17-year-old watching the film for the first time. I mean, what were your own experiences of actually being involved in the film, speaking to Simon and Lennie about being involved? And
Lennie had told me about the project beforehand, saying, I think I'm close to getting something off the ground and I'd love you to read the script. And I read it and I loved it. Before I did this, I hadn't worked for just over a year. I'd gone to America and done a film over there, which was a nice big studio movie, and then I came back to Britain and couldn't really get arrested, or at least I was being asked to audition. I just played the lead in this film, and I was being asked to audition for parts, 2 scenes in this and 2 scenes in that, and I thought maybe I should just wait a bit and see if something happens. And it was about a year, and then Lennie said, "I think it's going to go," and then I did this. So thanks, Lennie, for breaking that unemployment streak. It was really important, and you could see how important it was when as we were shooting it, what we were talking about. I get moved by Mona's performance, Mona Hammond. Mona. Every job you do, you learn something. Every job. I've never told him, I learned watching him as a slightly older actor, watching this guy come in and not be totally aware of lines and things and focus and all that kind of rubbish, but just had this passion and this heart for his character. And I watched Mona, who with a delicate lilt, Trinidadian lilt in her accent, could just touch words and move you. She didn't. It was like she wasn't acting, wasn't it? Yeah. When they shouted cut and she would just talk to us, a bunch of kids, she was the same. She didn't act, and I never forgot that. And it was a big deal doing this. I'm so proud of it, and I was so mad when it went out on BBC Two at 11 o'clock in the evening once, and then it was gone, and I got so mad about that because there's a lot of heart in there, you know. Sorry, I probably bounced through about 4 of your questions. Anyway, that's why it was important to me.
There's a bit of a frustration for me watching it because it's such a beautiful piece and it really holds up, as I said. But, you know, even from the first shot, there's something quite documentary about it. It feels as if, you know, you're just watching behavior. And it's, you know, I actually wonder, quite a few of the actors are no longer working. They dropped out maybe due to frustrations or lack of opportunity, but I kind of feel in my heart that if streaming was available now, a lot of those kids would still be working, they'd still have a career.
Absolutely. Simon, one of the things that fascinates me about the film is it's very, very untelevisual. You know, the opening scene and those kind of swirling cameras around and the kind of zooms and the often quite strange angles. I mean, was it always your intention to make it something that's very, very cinematic for television?
Yeah, definitely. One of the great things about the BBC then, and even a bit now, is even though the budgets were rubbish, they had a license where you could use lots and lots of music without much difficulty. And also, in certain conditions, they allowed swearing. So, you know, we could have the fun-loving criminals at the very beginning. And I think in that one, actually, they muted the motherfucking, which I was very annoyed about.
You notice that they muted that then, and then
like, there's loads more later.
It was to cross the watershed boundary, as
I'm sure.
Because the last half hour of the film was like it's all over the place. But that opening sequence was like, nope, can't have that.
But it was good because we did have mostly a bunch. I mean, we had a seasoned actor in Adrian, Mona, and Kate as well. But there were a bunch of kids, and they didn't necessarily know what they were doing technically, but they were well up for it. And we had, I won't say brutal, but we had a very definite casting process that was sort of like a rehearsal, and it did get whittled down. It was brutal in that some people didn't get parts. And then we rehearsed for a long time. And by the time we were going, none of us quite knew what we were doing, but we knew we were excited. And, you know, as I actually wasn't, he was late once, and I shouted at him, and then he wasn't late again, and he was brilliant. And those kids sort of, you know, Adrian saying he learned from Ashley, I'm afraid I did as well, because you go, wow, these kids are just so up for this and they're so determined. And we had a great time as well, even though there were some deeply sad scenes. It was really exciting.
I mean, one of the ones in particular I want to talk about very, very quickly, of course, is the final scene prior to the stabbing of Stefan. So, Kate, Adrian, Ashley, what was it like filming that scene as you come back from with Boniface and smash the kitchen and swear a few times?
I was watching it and I remember exactly what was going through my head. So I was scared before shooting that. And the film was primary colors, right? That you did in the States before you came back. So I was very aware of who Adrian was. Like the whole process, like he was huge to us. Do you know what I mean? On set, it was like, this is a Hollywood actor from the ends. Do you know what I mean? So every day was like, you have to be on point. You cannot flop. You got to be on your game. And I'd never cried like on cue before. Like, and I remember Simon being like, you got to go for it on this one. And he just showed me all this stuff that you can break. Like in the room, because there's a lot of breakaway glass. There's like sugar glass and stuff like that. And I think we only had one take of that, didn't we? It was just one take.
One take. Wow.
And it was like, so I was so scared, so nervous. So I had they gave me some of the tear stick stuff just to get me going. But once it was the first time I actually felt like, oh shit, I'm acting. Because, and I shouldn't have thought that because you're catching yourself in the moment, but like I got into it and it started and I started going and then some stuff just came out of me that I didn't even know existed myself. And like I proper became Stefan at that point. And I was proud, so proud of myself after, but I just remember before it, the night before, a few days before, like knowing the scene is coming and like questioning myself about whether I can achieve it, whether it's going to be good enough or whatever. And just watching it then, it brought tears to my eyes. Because I was like, it's still a powerful moment from like, you know, same as when I first saw it.
That's why I got my hands up. I remember we were in the kitchen and you were showing all the stuff that you could do. And I was standing there going, don't worry about me. I'm just, you just throw what you want. Don't worry about it. And that's why my hands are here all the time. I'm watching Ashley, because when he makes a move for something, I want to know what it is and where it's going. And that's kind of what makes it real. And I said, look, if something hits me, it's my fault. You just go for it. And so all the time, my hands are just here, just in case I need to block something. And it was great. It was great scene. Really good.
Kate, you and Ashley Chin were by the door watching the whole scene unfold. What was it like for you?
Well, I don't probably remember it quite as much as you, because I know it meant a big deal to you, but I just keep remembering that you were 16, weren't you? So young, and so I know, and I couldn't believe how you could jump over a wall like that. but so many of the actors were so young, weren't they? And just a real privilege to be involved with it all, and I think we all kind of really. You said about being a family, felt really kind of just because everyone was so young, just felt really protective of everybody. So it was it's a really important scene to be a part of. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's Lennie and I struggled with this. I don't know what happened, because Paul Greengrass made a brilliant film about Stephen Lawrence, which he made after this one, and I was going to the BBC saying, "Listen, we've got this film, and we can be ahead of the curve and everything." And I don't know what it was, and I think Lennie and I didn't really want to cut it. Maybe they wanted it to be shorter. And I think it just got caught in the corridors. I don't think there was any malevolence from the BBC. I don't think there was any sort of agenda. I think it got lost in some cracks, and then things overtook it. And, and Lennie was utterly furious and upset at the time. And now you go, oh, well, it's lovely to see it now. And, it has some kind of life, like Ashley says. There are a few people out there who it meant something to, and maybe will again.
And while we feel that frustration, they greenlit it. It wouldn't exist without them saying, go.
And there was a campfire nature to this movie. It was, this is pre-internet. So a lot of people would have seen this movie on BBC Two, even though it came out at 11 p.m. or whenever it was. But a lot of people saw this movie. Then there was a passing of VHS and all that stuff. And I think it unfortunately found its way onto YouTube somehow, but it would be lovely to see it in its full glory, given another life. It deserves it.
I mean, just on that, we have been trying tentatively to try and get some kind of iPlayer presence. It may be kind of difficult, but I think the audience and the kind of clamour for the film may kind of try and propel that agenda as well. So fingers crossed.
I'd say, look, I think a lot, this is just a small fraction of what I'm about to talk about, of what's going on. But I think, it's a small, big piece. And that is about people feeling safe to be themselves. Acting gave me that opportunity to be who I am. When I say this, I mean, to not feel like I had to do what everyone else was doing around me. Because if I am honest with you, at this point of my career, I was still out there. Do you know what I mean? Like I didn't see this as like a life choice or, a viable kind of career. I was having a bit of fun, but on my weekends and my days off or whatever, I was getting up to all sorts of madness with my friends and getting in trouble. That's been well documented, throughout that period of time. So, I can't hide it. So, but like it was my one opportunity that I could go into that space with these people and be Ashley without feeling threatened about, you know, what people would think about me and stuff like that. And it gave me that opportunity. But I don't think a lot of kids, you know, that age, coming from where Stefan comes from or from where I came from now today as well, have that opportunity. And I think it's even worse now. It's compounded by social media, by all the other things that we have around us that kind of try and dictate what we should look like, how we should dress, you know, how we should speak and whatever. So, you know, I feel like we have to empower teenagers especially and people that are in those sort of situations to step out from the crowd and be themselves. And that's what I've always tried to do in my career, with the choices I've made, with, you know, films I've done, and, you know, just the places I am and the people I speak to, just like be open and, you know, and try and normalize that. But, you know, like I said in the beginning, there's loads of other pieces of advice and little gems that I could give, but we could be here for a long time. But I'd say that's the most powerful.
Well, I was sort of criticising the BBC a bit earlier, but the BBC is why this film was made. And to be, with all respect to Netflix and all those, they wouldn't make that because I don't think it's got the commerciality. And that's why places like the BBC and Channel 4, we just need to protect them. Because it's very hard to get this stuff made because it doesn't sell shampoo or mobile phones or whatever. You know, we hope and think it says something that's important. But it's why that you should buy your TV license rather than just refuse to pay it. Well, a good way to work with actors is sometimes to leave them alone and not try and tell them what to do. The script was a great starting point, and we allowed the actors a little bit of room because the language, you know, you can tell from my accent, I wouldn't know half of that language. And, you know, I think we did do a rehearsal thing, and hopefully me and Lennie weren't too sort of authoritarian because I didn't know what I was doing any more than they did, really. So it wasn't a sort of creative, conscious decision to be naturalistic, but, you know, in that pretentious way, you want things to be truthful. So the way we achieved that was by hoping for the best, really.
I don't think so. I don't think you're just hoping for the best. I think it was because there was a really safe atmosphere where you could do anything. And so, and that was created by you primarily, and Lennie, and I think it was just, and the strength of the script, but I think that's why it was. Don't you think?
I think also from the youngsters, we hadn't been to drama school, so we weren't trained, so everything was quite raw, you know, and the slang, we were allowed to input our own slang, the clothes of the time, that was all our stuff, all the crazy Moschino, the Versace, all of those bright, crazy colours you see now selling Shoreditch for 250 quid for a sock. You know, that was all ours. So I think all of that stuff added to what you see. Yeah. You know.
The paisley ties, they weren't mine. that wasn't, and that jumper. Purple shirt and the paisley tie. I'm telling you, I got told to wear that.
I'm just sure.
It's not me.
There was no wardrobe. We bought our own clothes.
Just it felt like it was improvised, and so it had that humour to it. And what is heartbreaking, it's part of what Mr. says at the end, that children, what you're playing with is a very, very dear thing to us. And you watch kids playing and laughing at things that are very, very serious. And it's the distance between those two things that makes this work. It makes it funny because they're witty and they're funny and they're full of life and they engage with each other and it's laughable the way they crack jokes about each other. But the situation they're in and what they're playing with, it breaks your heart. The two things happen at the same time. And, you know, Lennie put that together and Simon kept that safe so the camera caught it all.
It's a long time ago.
25 years.
Can't remember the amount of shots and that, but I felt like a lot of them was difficult, you know, for for like Alexis said, we'd hardly ever been on TV before. Like we'd hardly ever done any acting. A lot of us hadn't. So it's kind of going back to the other point. I think it was the combination. We were all learning from each other at that point. And us definitely from the seasoned actors. And I think we had the right balance of, you know, kind of experience and raw talent that just made it so special. And there were moments where, like there's a moment at the Christmas kind of party that we're having in Agnes's house that is really short, but it just came back to me what Simon did. So we were all just like, he just rolled the camera, but we didn't know the camera was rolling. And we were like handing each other presents, you know, but they gave me like a box of cereal.
Cornflakes.
It was a box of cornflakes. Yeah. It was basically that. So I was expected to open something like proper, and it was like, but you see, like it just created those natural moments that were just cool. So I think like those times were like really smooth and easy, but then there were, I think like most times when we had to knuckle down, when we were trying to get to the crux of a scene and, you know, like break down characters, I didn't have any experience of doing that. So I was like, every one of those scenes was hard for me that I had to like give information. Do you know what I'm saying? It was
We'd
like,
never been around cameras,
Yeah.
so I'd never seen a steady cam before. So, you know, all of the stuff, I didn't know what you did when you fluffed your line. You know, it was all literally learning from day one. You know, from people like Adrian and Lennie and Simon.
sides. The sides.
The
That was
sides,
the
all of
first
that
time I
stuff,
saw
yeah.
sides and stuff like that. So yeah, it's crazy.